Lyssa's crystalline skin shifted through pale blues and soft greens as she lay in her sleep chamber, the colors reflecting her calm anticipation of rest. 6 hours, she told herself. 6 hours of perfect, empty darkness. Then morning. The chamber's lights dimmed in response to her settling thoughts. Her connection to the thought stream, the vast telepathic network that bound all Zephrani minds together, softened to a gentle background hum. Millions of her people across dozens of worlds, their thoughts and presences forming a warm ocean of collective consciousness that had cradled her since birth. Lyssa closed her eyes. Her consciousness dimmed cleanly and efficiently like a light switching off. Nothing. 6 hours passed in an instant. She woke, fully rested, her mind clear and sharp. The thought stream brightened in her awareness as her consciousness returned to full strength. She felt the familiar presences of other Zephrani on Cognition Prime, the research station where she worked. Their thoughts were their own, but their emotional states flowed through the connection, calm, focused, purposeful. Lyssa rose from her sleep chamber and moved to the window. The station orbited a blue giant star, and the light streaming through the transparent aluminum cast rainbow patterns across her translucent skin. She should feel satisfied. Content. She had rested efficiently, exactly as billions of Zephrani had done for millions of years. Instead, she felt that familiar emptiness, the sense that something should have happened during those 6 hours, something more than nothing. She had felt this way for as long as she could remember. As a child, she had asked her mother, "What happens when we sleep?" "Our bodies repair themselves," her mother had answered through the thought stream, her thoughts clear and logical. "Our minds consolidate memories and prepare for the next waking cycle. It is efficient." But do we see anything, experience anything? Her mother's confusion had been gentle but absolute. Why would we? Sleep is rest, little light, not activity. Lyssa had let it go then. But the question never left her. Now, at 32 years old, young for a Zephrani who lived for centuries, she had devoted her career to studying that question. She worked in the neuroscience division of Cognition Prime, researching sleep patterns across different species. The station hosted researchers from dozens of worlds, all studying consciousness, cognition, and the mind. And what Lyssa had discovered troubled her. Nearly every other sentient species in the galaxy experienced dreams. The Vrix had prophetic visions during their rest cycles, images that sometimes predicted future events with uncanny accuracy. The Solarians recreated their memories in vivid detail, reliving experiences and processing them emotionally. The insectoid creche experienced abstract sensory patterns, waves of color and texture that seemed to help them solve complex spatial problems. Even species with radically different neural structures, species that barely qualified as conscious by conventional standards, showed signs of mental activity during rest. Only the Zephrani slept in perfect darkness. Lyssa had written papers on the subject. She had proposed theories about why this might be. Perhaps the thought stream provided something that made dreams unnecessary, or perhaps dreams were simply an evolutionary dead end that the Zephrani had bypassed. Her colleagues had found the research mildly interesting but ultimately academic. Dreams, they pointed out, were just random neural firing. The Zephrani had evolved past such inefficiency. But Lyssa couldn't shake the feeling that they had lost something rather than transcended it. The chime of her communication panel pulled her from her thoughts. A message from the station administrator. The new human researcher had arrived and needed an escort. Since Lyssa's work involved cross-species sleep studies, she was the logical choice as a guide. Lyssa felt a flutter of curiosity through the thought stream, not her own, but shared from other Zephrani on the station. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Only 70 years had passed since first contact, and humans remained fascinating to many species. They were strange creatures, neither the strongest nor the smartest nor the longest-lived. But they were adaptable, creative, and possessed an irrational optimism that other species found both charming and baffling. Lyssa made her way to the docking bay. The station's corridors were wide and well-lit, designed to accommodate multiple species. She passed a pair of Solarians, their golden skin gleaming, engaged in what looked like a heated debate. A Vrix merchant haggled with a station vendor through a translation device. The diversity of life in the galaxy never ceased to amaze her, even as she felt the comfortable presence of her fellow Zephrani in the background of her mind. The human was waiting by the customs checkpoint, surrounded by luggage containers. She was small by galactic standards. Humans were, on average, one of the smaller sentient species. Dark hair pulled back from a round face, brown skin, and eyes that moved constantly, taking in everything around her with obvious excitement. "Dr. Kim?" Lyssa asked, her voice accompanied by the soft harmonics that characterized Zephrani's speech. The human turned and smiled, that peculiar expression where humans showed their teeth to indicate pleasure. Lyssa had learned to recognize it, though the gesture still seemed vaguely aggressive to her instincts. "Yes, you must be Lyssa. Thank you so much for meeting me." The human's words came rapid fire, full of energy. "This station is incredible. I've been studying the schematics for months, but seeing it in person is completely different, and the view of the star, absolutely breathtaking." Lyssa helped Dr. Kim with her luggage, and they began walking toward the residential section. The human talked constantly, commenting on the architecture, asking questions about the station's layout, sharing observations about everything she saw. It was overwhelming in a way that Zephrani conversation never was. Through the thought stream, communication was clear and efficient. Humans, lacking telepathy, seemed to compensate with sheer volume of words. "I had the weirdest dream last night," Dr. Kim said as they waited for a transport pod. "I was back in my childhood home in Seoul, but it was also somehow my laboratory at Stanford, and my grandmother was there teaching me calculus using origami cranes. Isn't that bizarre? Dreams are so strange." Lyssa stopped walking. Her skin flickered through several colors: surprise, confusion, alarm. "You experienced a waking hallucination?" she asked. "Should I summon medical assistance?" Dr. Kim laughed, then her expression changed as she studied Lyssa's face. "Wait, you're serious, Lyssa. You don't dream." "I do not understand. I was sleeping. Sleep is unconsciousness." "But," Dr. Kim's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you really don't dream, not at all." "What is dreaming?" Lyssa asked, though she knew the answer in theory. She had studied dreams for years, but no Zephrani truly understood what it meant to experience them. Dr. Kim stared at her for a long moment. Then she smiled again, but this time it was different, not just pleasure, but excitement. "Discovery." "Lyssa," she said, "I think you and I are going to have some very interesting conversations." Over the next 3 days, Dr. Sarah Kim became increasingly fascinated with what she called the Zephrani dream deficit. She had come to Cognition Prime to study cross-species sleep patterns, part of a broader human initiative to understand how different forms of consciousness processed rest and recovery. The discovery that an entire species didn't dream was, in her words, potentially the most significant finding in comparative neurology in decades. Lyssa met with her daily, answering questions, submitting to neural scans, and trying to explain what Zephrani sleep felt like. It was difficult. "How did you describe the absence of experience?" "It's like," Lyssa searched for words. "Imagine if I asked you to describe the 6 hours before you were born each day. There's nothing to describe. Consciousness stops, then starts again." Sarah sat back in her chair, her laboratory filled with holographic displays showing neural scans and sleep data. "But that's not what sleep is like for humans, or most species. We're unconscious, yes, but the brain remains active. Dreams aren't really separate from waking consciousness. They're a different mode of the same process." She pulled up a scan of a human brain during REM sleep. Lyssa had seen such images before, but Sarah's explanation brought them to life. "Look at this activity," Sarah said, pointing to areas lighting up in rapid succession. "The visual cortex is active, even though the eyes are closed. The amygdala, which processes emotions, is hyperactive. The hippocampus, where memories are stored, is firing constantly. But the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and executive function, is dimmed. The result is this incredible state where the brain creates vivid sensory experiences, processes emotions intensely, and makes bizarre connections between unrelated memories, all without the logical filter that normally governs our thoughts." "It sounds chaotic," Lyssa said. "It is. But that chaos serves a purpose. Dreams help us consolidate memories, process emotions, solve problems, and practice for threats in a safe environment. And beyond the practical benefits, dreams are where creativity comes from, where we imagine things that don't exist yet. Lyssa studied the scans, then looked at her own, a Zephrani brain during sleep. The contrast was stark. Where Sarah's scan showed chaos and activity, Lyssa's showed quiet, organized maintenance processes, everything neat and efficient. We Zephrani process memories through the thought stream, Lyssa said. We share experiences with our people and review them collectively. We consolidate them efficiently in groups. But where do you process emotions that you can't share? Sarah asked. Where do you work through things that are too personal, too raw, too contradictory to put into the collective? Lyssa didn't have a good answer. Zephrani didn't really have personal emotions that couldn't be shared. Or rather, they did, but such feelings were uncomfortable, private, slightly shameful. The thought stream was built on openness, on shared experience. To have feelings you couldn't articulate to your people felt like a failing. And creativity, Sarah continued. Where does that come from for you? Where do you get new ideas that don't follow from existing knowledge? Again, Lyssa struggled to answer. Zephrani art was beautiful, mathematically perfect patterns that pleased the eye and mind. But it followed strict rules, formulas developed over millennia. Their literature was philosophical and profound, but it built on existing frameworks. Their technology advanced steadily but incrementally. When was the last time a Zephrani had created something truly revolutionary, something that broke the pattern rather than perfecting it? Lyssa felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name, couldn't quite share through the thought stream. It felt like hunger but not for food, like longing but not for any specific thing. I want to understand, she said quietly. I want to know what we're missing. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with the peculiar intensity humans displayed when excited. What if I told you that you might be able to? How? I don't have the neural structures, but you do, Sarah interrupted. She pulled up a comparative scan showing a human brain next to a Zephrani brain. Look here. These structures in the human brain that activate during dreaming. You have analogous structures. They're dormant, but they're there. Like vestigial organs, except they're not truly vestigial, they're just suppressed. She highlighted areas in Lyssa's brain scan that Lyssa had never paid attention to before, small clusters of neurons that showed minimal activity during sleep. I think the thought stream is interfering with your ability to dream, Sarah said. Your minds are never truly alone. Even in sleep, you maintain that low-level connection to the collective. Your brain never fully enters the isolated state necessary for dreaming. You're suggesting we evolved dreams away when we developed telepathy? Not exactly. I think you still have the capacity. You've just been suppressing it for so long that you've forgotten how. Like a muscle that's never used, it atrophies, but it doesn't disappear. Lyssa felt her skin shift through colors, excitement mixing with fear. Could it be restored? Sarah hesitated. Maybe. If we could temporarily suppress your connection to the thought stream during sleep, create true mental isolation, your brain might remember how to generate dreams. It would be experimental, potentially risky. And honestly, I don't know what it would feel like for you to be completely disconnected from your people. For humans, being alone in our minds is normal. For you, it would be like sensory deprivation, Lyssa finished. She had studied human psychology. Humans who were completely isolated went mad. But for a Zephrani, isolation wasn't physical, it was mental. To be cut off from the thought stream was to be utterly, completely alone in a way humans couldn't imagine. The thought terrified her. But that strange hunger, that inexplicable longing, was stronger than the fear. I want to try, Lyssa said. The news spread through the station's Zephrani community like ripples in the thought stream. Lyssa had expected this. Privacy was difficult when you shared thoughts and emotions with your people. She hadn't broadcast her intentions explicitly, but her excitement and fear had been noticeable, and curious minds had questioned her gently until the truth emerged. The reactions ranged from concern to outrage. Elder Theron confronted her in the station's communal space, a large atrium where multiple species gathered for meals and social interaction. He was old even by Zephrani standards, his crystalline skin etched with the fine patterns that came with centuries of life. His presence in the thought stream was powerful, carrying the weight of age and wisdom. You would sever yourself from the thought stream to experience human neural waste. His voice was calm, but his skin flickered with deep disapproval, reds and dark purples. Our clarity of thought, our logical unity, is what makes us advanced. Dreams are evolutionary dead ends that species like humans haven't outgrown. Other Zephrani had gathered, drawn by the emotional intensity flowing through the thought stream. Lyssa felt their concern, their confusion, their judgment. For a species built on collective consciousness, what she was proposing felt like betrayal. Dreams aren't waste, Lyssa said, trying to keep her voice steady. They serve functions we don't have alternatives for. Emotional processing, creative synthesis, problem-solving through non-logical pathways. We process emotions through the thought stream, another elder interrupted. We create through mathematical precision. We solve problems through collective reasoning. Why would we need these inferior methods? Because maybe they're not inferior, Lyssa said. Maybe they're just different, and maybe having both collective consciousness and individual dreaming would make us more than we are now. The thought stream buzzed with responses. Most were negative. A few younger Zephrani radiated curiosity, but they quickly suppressed it under the weight of collective disapproval. Elder Theron stepped closer, and Lyssa felt his presence more strongly, not forcing thoughts into her mind, but radiating disappointment and genuine worry. "I do not wish to forbid you," he said more gently, "but I fear you do not understand what you risk. The thought stream is not just how we communicate. It is who we are. To cut yourself off from it, even temporarily, may damage your ability to reconnect. You may lose yourself, Lyssa. Or I might find myself," she whispered. But the elder's words stayed with her as she walked back to her quarters. What if he was right? What if the isolation drove her mad? What if she lost her connection to the thought stream permanently? She found Sarah in her laboratory that evening, running simulations. The human looked up as Lyssa entered, and her expression immediately became concerned. "You heard about the objection," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question. My people are afraid for me. Perhaps they're right to be." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then gestured for Lyssa to sit. "Every species thinks their way of experiencing consciousness is the right way," she said. "Humans have learned, slowly, painfully, that our differences make us stronger. We have people who think in pictures, people who think in words, people who process the world completely differently from the majority. For a long time, we treated those differences as defects. We tried to force everyone into the same mold." She pulled up images on her display, human history, showing institutions where people were locked away for being different, medical procedures designed to make people normal, centuries of cruelty justified by the belief that there was one correct way to be human. "We were wrong," Sarah continued. "Those different minds, the ones we called broken, often saw solutions the rest of us missed. They created art that changed culture. They asked questions no one else thought to ask. What we called weaknesses were actually different kinds of strength. You think dreams are like that, a different kind of strength? I think consciousness is like that. There's no single right way to think, to experience existence, to be sentient. The thought stream is beautiful. I've watched your people interact, and the harmony you have is something humans can only dream of achieving." She smiled at her own pun. "But maybe dreams offer something the thought stream can't. Not better, not worse, just different, and maybe if you're brave enough, you can have both." Lyssa felt her skin shift through colors, fear and hope mixing together. "Will you help me?" "Only if you're absolutely sure," Sarah said, "and only with proper safety protocols. We'll go slowly. If at any point it becomes too much, we stop immediately." "I'm sure," Lyssa said, and she was, terrified but sure. They prepared for 3 days. Sarah and her colleague Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's human medical officer, designed a neural dampening field that would suppress Lyssa's connection to the thought stream. It wouldn't harm the connection, just temporarily block it, like closing a door without locking it. They would monitor her vital signs throughout. If her stress levels became dangerous, they would wake her immediately. The first attempt would be brief, just 20 to 30 minutes. If her brain showed REM patterns, if she actually began to dream, they would consider it a success. Lyssa spent those 3 days in a state of constant anxiety. The thought stream buzzed with concern from her fellow Zephrani. Even those who disagreed with her expressed genuine worry. Elder Theron maintained his disapproval, but even he sent a gentle pulse of care through the connection. "Be safe, young one." On the night of the experiment, Lyssa entered Sarah's laboratory feeling like she was walking to her own funeral. Marcus was there, checking medical equipment. Sarah was running through her pre-experiment checklist for the third time. "You can still back out," Sarah reminded her. "No shame in that." "I know," Lyssa said, "but I need to know." They fitted her with the neural dampening device, a slim circlet that rested against her temples. It would create a field that specifically interfered with the telepathic frequencies the Zephrani used. They also prepared a mild sedative to help her fall asleep more easily. "The hardest part will be the moment the dampening field activates," Marcus warned. "You've never been completely alone in your own mind. It's going to feel strange, possibly frightening. Try to focus on breathing. Remember that we're right here and you can stop anytime." Lyssa lay down on the medical bed. Through the window, she could see the blue giant star the station orbited, its light painting everything in shades of sapphire and silver. "Ready?" Sarah asked. Lyssa reached out to the thought stream one last time. She felt her people millions of minds across dozens of worlds, the accumulated consciousness of her entire species, warm and present and eternal. The sense of belonging, of never being alone that had cradled her since birth. Then she nodded. Sarah activated the dampening field. The silence was absolute. Lyssa's skin flashed through every color at once: panic, terror, shock. The thought stream was gone, not diminished, not distant, gone. She was alone in her mind in a way she had never experienced. It felt like drowning, like being buried alive, like the universe itself had vanished and left her floating in a void. "Breathe, Lyssa," Sarah's voice came through speakers. "You're safe. Focus on my voice. Breathe." Lyssa couldn't breathe. Her body was trying to breathe, but her mind was screaming. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. No one else existed. She existed in a prison of her own consciousness with no doors, no windows, no connection to breathe. Marcus's voice joined Sarah's. "In and out, slow, you're having a panic response. It's normal, breathe with me, in and out." Gradually, incrementally, Lyssa's panic subsided. The silence was still there, still terrifying, but she began to adjust. She focused on the voices, on the sensation of breathing, on the physical reality of her body on the medical bed. She was alone, but she was still herself. "Good," Sarah said. "You're doing great. Now I'm going to administer the sedative. Let yourself relax. Let your mind drift. We're right here." The sedative entered her system. Lyssa felt her thoughts begin to slow, to soften. But it was different from normal Zephrani sleep. Instead of the clean shutdown she was used to, her mind began to drift in strange directions. Thoughts connected to other thoughts in ways that didn't quite make sense. Time became fluid. She was in her laboratory, but the walls were wrong. They pulsed with colors thoughts made visible. The equipment floated in midair, rearranging itself in patterns that were beautiful but nonsensical. Someone was there. "Mother." Lyssa heard her own voice, but distant, as if someone else was speaking. Her mother stood by the window, looking out at a star that was both the blue giant and also every star Lyssa had ever seen. She turned, and she was young, younger than Lyssa remembered from her childhood, but also older somehow, ageless. "Little light," her mother said, using the name she'd called Lyssa as a child. "You've traveled far to find this place." "Where are we?" "Nowhere, everywhere, the place between thoughts." Her mother's form shifted, becoming translucent, then solid again. The dream logic made perfect sense while making no sense at all. "I never got to tell you this while I lived. When I was young, I sometimes felt it too, the emptiness in the void of rest. I thought I was broken." Lyssa understood, though she didn't understand how she understood. This wasn't really her mother. This was her own mind, creating a form to talk to itself, processing grief she'd never fully expressed through the thought stream. Her mother had died 7 years ago. In Zephrani culture, death was logical, natural. The deceased's final thoughts were shared through the thought stream, their knowledge and experience preserved in the collective memory. There was no need for prolonged grief, they lived on in the minds of their people. But Lyssa had never said goodbye. Not really. She had shared the collective mourning, filed the memories away efficiently, and moved on. Except she hadn't moved on. And now, in this impossible space, her mind was giving her the chance to finish what she'd left incomplete. The dream shifted. She was a child again in her family's dwelling on the Zephrani homeworld. Her mother was teaching her the mathematical patterns of Zephrani art, precise, beautiful, perfect. But in the dream, the patterns came alive. They lifted off the display surface and became creatures made of light and thought, dancing through the air. "You always wanted to make them dance," her dream mother said. "I taught you to keep them still. Logical, perfect, I'm sorry for that." Young Lyssa reached out and the light creatures responded. They swirled around her, making patterns that were chaotic but beautiful, inefficient but alive. The dream accelerated. Lyssa experienced fragments of conversations she wished she'd had, moments she regretted, possibilities she'd never explored. Some were memories, accurate down to the smallest detail. Others were complete fabrications, but all of them felt emotionally true. She saw herself meeting Sarah for the first time, but in the dream they were both made of starlight. She saw the thought stream as a physical thing, a vast river of light connecting all Zephrani. But she stood on the shore, separate, seeing its beauty from the outside for the first time. She saw her mother in a dozen different contexts, different ages, different moments. And slowly, through the dream logic that made sense only while dreaming, she processed the grief she'd never allowed herself to feel. The dream reached its culmination. Lyssa stood in a space that was both her laboratory and the cosmos itself. Millions of thoughts swirled around her like galaxies. Her mother stood beside her, but now Lyssa fully understood that this was herself, her own wisdom, her own understanding, taking a form that her unconscious mind needed. "This is what we lost," Dream Mother said. "Not just dreams, the ability to be alone with ourselves, to process our own thoughts without the collective, to imagine things that don't exist yet. Why did we lose it? Because connection is safer than solitude. Unity is stronger than individuality. But in choosing absolute connection, we gave up the place where new ideas are born, where personal truths live, where the self can be alone with itself and discover who it really is." The dream space began to fracture, breaking apart into mathematical patterns. Lyssa realized she was waking up. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Her dream mother smiled, that human gesture that Lyssa had learned to recognize, but now it was on her mother's face and it meant something different, something personal. "Every time you close your eyes," her mother said, "if you're brave enough to be alone." Lyssa woke with tears streaming down her face. Zephrani rarely cried. It was a stress response, not an emotional one, but these tears felt different. They felt necessary. Sarah and Marcus were there immediately, checking her vitals, asking if she was okay. The dampening field was already deactivated, and Lyssa felt the thought stream rushing back, her people, her connection, the warm presence of collective consciousness surrounding her like an embrace. "I saw her," Lyssa whispered. "I saw my mother." Sarah started to speak, probably to explain that it was just her own mind, that dreams often used familiar faces, but Lyssa interrupted. I know it wasn't really her, but it was everything I needed to say to her, everything I never let myself feel." And it was beautiful. She tried to describe the experience, but words were inadequate. How could she explain colors that didn't exist, emotions that had no names, the logic that wasn't logical but somehow made perfect sense? "We recorded your neural activity," Marcus said, pulling up scans. "Lyssa, you did it, clear REM patterns, theta waves, the same neural signatures we see in dreaming humans. You dreamed." Sarah was staring at the scans with an expression of wonder. "And look at this. New neural connections forming, areas of your brain that were dormant showing activity. It's like your brain remembered something it forgot millions of years ago." Lyssa looked at the scans, at the proof of what she'd experienced. For the first time in her life, something had happened during those empty hours of sleep. Something meaningful, something personal, something that was hers alone. "I want to do it again," she said. "Not just once. I want to learn to dream regularly. I want to know what else we've been missing." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. "One experience doesn't prove anything," Sarah said carefully. "We'd need long-term studies, multiple subjects, careful monitoring." "Then let's begin," Lyssa said. But she knew it wouldn't be that simple, because already through the thought stream she could feel the reactions of her people. The Zephrani on the station had sensed her return to consciousness, had felt the intensity of her emotions, and her experience was spreading through the collective like wildfire. The Zephrani had always shared everything. And now, whether she wanted to or not, Lyssa had just shared the most profound experience of her life with her entire species. The controversy was immediate and intense. The inquiry was held in the station's council chamber, a large room with a domed ceiling that displayed real-time imagery of the surrounding space. Representatives from multiple species sat in concentric circles, with the Zephrani elders occupying positions of prominence. Lyssa stood in the center, feeling exposed. Sarah stood beside her, and she was grateful for the human's presence. Through the thought stream, Lyssa could feel the collective judgment of her people, concern, anger, fascination, fear, all mixing together in a way that made it hard to think clearly. Elder Theron spoke first. Lyssa has undergone an experimental procedure that severed her connection to the thought stream and induced what humans call dreaming. She has returned to us physically intact, but the psychological effects are concerning. She experiences emotions she cannot control. She describes hallucinations as if they were real experiences. This is precisely why our people evolved beyond such inefficient neural processes. Another elder, Meyerth, added, "More troubling is that younger Zephrani have expressed interest in trying this procedure themselves. We risk fragmenting our collective consciousness, introducing chaos into the clarity we have maintained for millions of years. But what have we created in the last 1,000 years?" Lyssa found herself speaking, her voice stronger than she expected. "Our art follows the same mathematical patterns our ancestors used. Our philosophy discusses the same questions without new answers. Our technology advances incrementally because we optimize what exists instead of imagining what doesn't." She pulled up her neural scans, displaying them for the entire council. "These aren't damaged pathways. These are activated potentials. Our brains still have the capacity to dream. We've just suppressed it for so long that we forgot it existed. What if we're not losing anything by reconnecting with this ability? What if we're reclaiming something we lost?" Elder Theron's skin flickered with deep reds, frustration, concern. "Individual consciousness is chaos. The thought stream provides clarity, unity, truth. You propose we embrace hallucination and call it progress." Sarah stepped forward. "May I speak?" The elders conferred briefly, then nodded. "Every species I've studied has strengths and weaknesses," Sarah said. "Humans dream, but we lack your telepathic unity. We create incredible new ideas, but we also miscommunicate constantly and struggle to work together. There is no perfect form of consciousness. There are only different forms, each with unique advantages." She displayed data from human history, discoveries made in dreams, problems solved during sleep, artistic and scientific breakthroughs that came from the unconscious mind. A human chemist discovered the structure of benzene in a dream about a snake eating its tail, she explained. A human inventor saw the design for the sewing machine needle in a nightmare about warriors with spears. These weren't despite dreams being inefficient. This happened because of dreaming's unique properties. The brain makes connections during dreams that it can't make during logical thought. She paused, making eye contact with several of the elders. But more importantly, Lyssa isn't trying to make all Zephrani become human. She's trying to reclaim something your own species once had. Your neural structures prove you evolved with this capacity. Whether you use it or not should be a choice, not a mandate. For a moment, there was silence. Then a young Zephrani named Kes stood up from the observers section. Lyssa knew him. He was a mathematician who worked in the station's research division. Through the thought stream, she felt his nervousness but also his determination. "I want to try it too," Kes said. The elders turned toward him, surprise and disapproval radiating through the thought stream. Elder Theron began to speak, but Kes continued. "I've felt it as well, the emptiness, the sense that something should be there during sleep. I've studied other species' creativity, their art, their innovations. They imagine things we don't, they make leaps we can't, and if this might be why, I want to understand." Another young Zephrani stood, then another. Within minutes, a dozen young Zephrani had risen, all expressing the same desire. The elders tried to restore order, but for the first time in Lyssa's memory, the thought stream was filled with genuine disagreement. Different opinions, different desires, different visions of the future. The Zephrani were arguing, truly arguing, not just presenting different perspectives for logical consideration. The collective consciousness was fragmenting into individual voices, each demanding to be heard. Elder Theron raised his hand, and gradually the chamber quieted. His skin showed deep purples and blues, concern mixed with something else. Curiosity. "This is unprecedented," he said. "We cannot make a decision of this magnitude hastily. The Council proposes the following. Lyssa and any volunteers may continue the research, but only under strict medical supervision. The results will be monitored for 1 year. After that time, we will reconvene and make a determination about whether this practice should be expanded, continued, or forbidden." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't a ban either. It was something the Zephrani rarely experienced: a compromise, an uncertain outcome, an experiment without a predetermined conclusion. After the council adjourned, Elder Theron approached Lyssa privately. His presence in the thought stream was complex. Disapproval was still there, but layered with something unexpected. "I do not approve of what you're doing," he said, "but I also cannot deny that you've experienced something we cannot fully understand without experiencing it ourselves. And perhaps that is precisely what makes this worth studying." Over the following months, 12 young Zephrani joined Lyssa in the Dream Research Program. Each responded differently to the experience. Some, like Lyssa, had vivid narrative dreams full of memory and emotion. Others experienced abstract patterns and sensations, color and sound without form. One, a researcher named Vess, discovered she could control her dreams, what Sarah called lucid dreaming, and used it to visualize complex mathematical structures. They met weekly to share experiences. The meetings were chaotic by Zephrani standards, everyone talking over each other, laughing, sometimes arguing. They expressed emotions without the dampening filter of the thought stream. They disagreed with each other openly. They were messy and inefficient and alive in a way that other Zephrani found disturbing. But they were also discovering things. Kes, the mathematician who had first volunteered, began using his dreams to approach problems differently. He would study a mathematical puzzle before sleep, then dream about it while disconnected from the thought stream. His sleeping mind would visualize the problem as a physical space he could walk through, seeing connections that weren't visible through pure logic. One evening, he arrived at the group meeting with his skin flickering through excited golds and greens. "I solved it," he said. "The Thesian convergence problem, the one our team has been working on for 3 years." The others leaned forward. The Thesian convergence was a famous unsolved problem in quantum mathematics, one that had stumped researchers across multiple species. "I dreamed about it," Kes explained. "I saw it as a building made of light and numbers. I walked through it, and the structure showed me where the error in our assumptions was. It took me 2 days to translate what I saw into proper mathematics, but the solution works. I've checked it a dozen times." He shared his findings with the group, and Lyssa felt a chill run through her crystalline skin. The solution was elegant, revolutionary, and completely valid. Kes had solved in his sleep what teams of fully conscious, logically focused minds couldn't solve while awake. "How can we trust a solution that came from hallucination?" Elder Meyerth asked when Kes presented his findings to the wider scientific community. "Test it," Kes replied simply. "Dreams don't have to make sense while you're having them. But sometimes they reveal truths you couldn't see while awake." They tested it. The solution held up under scrutiny. Within weeks, Kes's dream-derived breakthrough was being applied to quantum communication systems across the galaxy. The Zephrani scientific community couldn't ignore the results. Skepticism remained, but it was now tempered with cautious interest. Another dreamer, a young artist named Senna, began creating art inspired by her dreams. She would disconnect from the thought stream, dream for an hour, then recreate what she saw in physical form upon waking. The resulting art was unlike anything in Zephrani culture. It was chaotic, emotional, imperfect. Traditional Zephrani art followed mathematical principles, sacred geometry, perfect symmetry, patterns that pleased the eye through their logical beauty. Senna's art ignored these rules. Her sculptures seemed to move even when still, her light paintings shifted and changed depending on the viewer's angle, her compositions created emotional responses that couldn't be explained through logic alone. Many Zephrani hated it. They called it ugly, disturbing, wrong, but others, especially younger Zephrani, were mesmerized. It feels alive, one young observer said at Senna's first exhibition. Traditional art is beautiful, but it's static, perfect. This art has emotion, movement. It makes me feel things I can't name. The exhibition became controversial, then popular, then influential. Other artists began experimenting, trying to capture something of the dream logic in their work even without dreaming themselves. A cultural shift began, small but undeniable. 6 months into the research program, Lyssa made another discovery. She and 3 other dreamers had decided to try sleeping at the same time, each disconnected from the thought stream in separate chambers but with their brain activity synchronized and monitored. What happened defied explanation. Their dreams intersected, not through the thought stream that was completely suppressed, but through something else, something that followed different rules. Lyssa found herself in a dream space that felt shared. She saw the other dreamers there, their forms flickering and uncertain but present. They could communicate, but not through words or thoughts, through images, emotions, sensations. When they all woke, they compared notes. Each had experienced the same shared dream space, though their perspectives and details differed. It wasn't telepathy as the Zephrani understood it. It was something new, something that existed only in the realm of dreams. They called it the dream network. Sarah was fascinated and baffled in equal measure. This shouldn't be possible, she said, studying their synchronized brain scans. Humans don't do this. No species I've studied shares dreams without some form of telepathy, but you're not using telepathy. The dampening field prevents that. So what are you using? Maybe, Lyssa suggested, consciousness is bigger than we understand. The thought stream is one way minds connect, but maybe dreams opened another pathway, one that exists in the unconscious realm. The implications were staggering. The Zephrani had always believed the thought stream was the only form of mental connection. But what if there were other forms, other ways consciousness could interact? The discovery attracted attention from xenopsychologists across the galaxy. Research teams arrived at Cognition Prime to study the phenomenon. The Zephrani Council, still skeptical but unable to deny the results, authorized expanded research. 1 year after Lyssa's first dream, the program had grown to over 100 participants across multiple stations and worlds. Zephrani culture was changing, though the changes were subtle and still controversial. Young Zephrani now learned both, how to connect with the thought stream and how to disconnect and dream. Dream art became an accepted, if still debated, movement. Problems requiring creative leaps were approached both logically through the thought stream and intuitively through dream exploration. The elders remained largely skeptical, but even they couldn't deny the results. Zephrani science was advancing faster than it had in centuries. Their art was evolving in unexpected directions. Their culture, stagnant for millennia, was experiencing a renaissance. Elder Theron, in a private conversation with Lyssa, admitted, "I still believe the thought stream is our greatest strength, our unity, our clarity. But perhaps we were wrong to see dreams as weakness. Perhaps all forms of consciousness have value." It was the closest thing to approval Lyssa would get from him, and she treasured it. 18 months after her first dream, Lyssa stood in her laboratory preparing for another sleep session. The process had become routine now. She no longer feared the isolation when the dampening field activated. Instead, she looked forward to it, the chance to be alone with her own mind, to explore the infinite possibilities of her unconscious. She had refined her technique. She could now disconnect from the thought stream for up to 4 hours at a time without distress. Her dreams had become more complex, more controlled. She could sometimes guide them, asking questions and receiving answers from the deepest parts of her own consciousness. Tonight, she would join the dream network again. 7 other dreamers were preparing simultaneously in different parts of the station. They would meet in that impossible space where dreams intersected, where individual minds touched without the thought stream's mediation. As she lay down and activated the dampening field, Lyssa reflected on how much had changed. She was still Zephrani, still connected to her people through the thought stream during her waking hours. But she was also something new, a Zephrani who dreamed, who had learned to value both connection and solitude, both logic and chaos, both the collective and the individual. The sedative took effect, and her consciousness began to drift. The familiar transition into dream space felt like falling and flying simultaneously. The laboratory around her faded, replaced by impossible geometries and shifting colors. Then she was there in the shared dream space. The other dreamers appeared, their forms fluid and uncertain. They weren't connected through the thought stream, weren't sharing thoughts directly, but somehow they were together in this space that existed only in their unconscious minds. "Shall we explore?" Vess asked, though her words weren't really words, but rather feelings shaped into meaning. Together they stepped forward into the chaos, into the infinite possibilities of the dreaming mind. They moved through spaces that couldn't exist in physical reality, rooms with 5 dimensions, colors that didn't exist in the normal spectrum, concepts given physical form. Lyssa saw a structure in the distance, a tower made of crystallized thoughts. She moved toward it, the others following. As they approached, she realized it was built from all the dreams the Zephrani had never had, all the centuries of empty sleep, all the lost creativity and unexplored emotions. "This is what we gave up," Kess said, his form shifting between solid and translucent. "But we're reclaiming it now." The tower began to transform. New structures grew from it, built from their current dreams, their new understandings. It became something beautiful and strange, a monument to both what was lost and what was being found. Lyssa felt joy pure and uncomplicated, not shared through the thought stream but emanating from her own consciousness. Personal joy, individual triumph. "We did this," she thought. "We changed ourselves, we changed our people." The dream shifted again, faster now. They explored together, each dreamer contributing their unique perspective, their individual creativity. They built impossible things and tore them down. They processed emotions and solved problems. They played. That was perhaps the most revolutionary thing. Zephrani didn't play, not really. Play was inefficient. But in dreams, efficiency didn't matter. Only exploration, creativity, joy. Eventually, Lyssa felt the pull of waking consciousness. The dream space began to fade, the other dreamers becoming less distinct. She sent them a pulse of gratitude, not through the thought stream, but through the dream network. They responded in kind. Then she was awake. The thought stream rushed back as the dampening field deactivated. Her people, her connection, the warm presence of collective consciousness. She had missed it during her hours of isolation, but now she appreciated it more deeply because she knew what the alternative felt like. She could be alone, and she could be together. Both were valuable, both were necessary. Sarah entered the laboratory, smiling. "How was it?" "Beautiful," Lyssa said. "We built things that don't exist. We explored spaces that couldn't be real. We played. Played. Yes, just for the joy of it, just to see what would happen." Lyssa sat up, her skin shifting through happy golds and peaceful blues. "I don't think my people have truly played in millions of years. We've been so focused on efficiency, on logic, on collective purpose. But in dreams, we can just be." Sarah sat down beside her. "You've given your people an incredible gift, Lyssa. Not just dreams themselves, but permission to embrace the parts of themselves they'd forgotten. The messy parts, the inefficient parts, the individual parts." "You gave me that gift," Lyssa corrected. "Humans taught me that weakness and strength aren't opposites, that sometimes our greatest vulnerabilities contain our deepest potentials." "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. Lyssa looked out the window at the blue giant star, its light painting everything in shades of sapphire. In her laboratory, data scrolled across displays showing the neural patterns of dreaming Zephrani. In her mind, the thought stream hummed with the presence of her people, including now a small but growing subset who also knew what it meant to dream. "Now we keep exploring," she said. "We learn to integrate both, the thought stream and dreams, the collective and the individual, logic and chaos. We become more than we were, not by replacing what we are, but by adding to it." She thought about her mother, who appeared in her dreams sometimes, offering wisdom that was really Lyssa's own wisdom in disguise. She thought about the empty nights of her childhood, that nameless longing for something she couldn't define. She thought about the terror of her first isolation and the joy of her first dream. "We're not just reclaiming dreams," Lyssa continued. "We're reclaiming the right to be alone with ourselves, to have private thoughts, personal emotions, individual creativity. For millions of years, the Zephrani have been one people. Now we're learning to be billions of individuals who choose to be one people. It's a small difference, but it changes everything. Sarah stood and began preparing her research logs. You know this is going to spread, right? Not just among the Zephrani. Other telepathic species will hear about this. They'll want to try it too. You've started something that could change multiple civilizations. Good, Lyssa said. She felt certain in a way that had nothing to do with the thought stream's collective certainty and everything to do with her own individual conviction. The galaxy needs more types of consciousness, not fewer. More ways of thinking, not fewer. More possibilities, not fewer. She lay back down, not to sleep, but just to rest. Through the thought stream, she could feel the curiosity of other Zephrani who had heard about the Dream Network. Some were skeptical, some were afraid, but more and more were curious. Change was coming. Slow, carefully considered change, because the Zephrani were cautious people, but real change nonetheless. And it had started with one question: what happens when we sleep? For billions of years, the Zephrani had answered nothing. Now they knew better. Now they knew that in the darkness, in the silence, in the space between conscious thoughts, entire universes could be born. Problems could be solved. Emotions could be processed. Art could be created. The self could meet itself and discover truths that collective consciousness could never reveal. Lyssa closed her eyes, not to sleep, but just to experience the darkness behind her eyelids. Soon she would dream again. Soon she would disconnect from the thought stream and enter that chaotic, beautiful, impossible space where anything could happen. But for now, she was content to rest in the space between, connected to her people, yet uniquely herself. Part of the collective, yet individual. Logical and chaotic, efficient and creative together and alone. All of it, everything, complete. She thought about Sarah's final words from their first real conversation, the ones that had stayed with her through this entire journey. There's no single right way to be conscious, to think, to experience existence. There's only the courage to explore what you are and the wisdom to embrace what you find. The Zephrani had found courage. They were learning wisdom. And every night in laboratories and sleep chambers across dozens of worlds, they were closing their eyes and discovering new universes within themselves, one dream at a time. Sarah Kim made her final log entry for the day, her voice quiet in the empty laboratory. Research log, day 547 of Zephrani Dream Study. Lead researcher, Dr. Sarah Kim. The Zephrani Dream experiment has exceeded all expectations. What began as a single individual's curiosity has evolved into a cultural transformation. Over 300 Zephrani now regularly practice disconnected dreaming, and that number grows daily. The implications extend far beyond the Zephrani. We've proven that evolutionary changes in consciousness aren't permanent. Neural pathways can be reactivated. Lost capacities can be reclaimed. What a species becomes doesn't have to limit what it can choose to be. Humans aren't special because we dream. We're special because we learn to value all forms of consciousness, even the messy, inefficient, chaotic ones. We taught the Zephrani that weakness and strength aren't opposites, that sometimes our greatest vulnerabilities contain our deepest potentials. That's not just humanity's gift to the Zephrani. That's humanity's gift to the galaxy. The understanding that there's no single right way to be conscious, to think, to experience existence. There's only the courage to explore what you are and the wisdom to embrace what you find. The Zephrani found that courage, and every night they close their eyes and discover new universes within themselves, one dream at a time. End log. She turned off the recording and looked out at the blue giant star. Somewhere on the station, Lyssa and the other dreamers were sleeping, their minds exploring impossible spaces, building impossible things, becoming impossible versions of themselves. And in the morning, they would wake and share their discoveries with a people who were learning that the greatest journey wasn't to the stars. It was into the infinite space within their own minds.